Thank you for having me today. I'm disappointed I couldn't be there in person because of COVID, but thankfully I can still be here virtually. Um, this workshop is something I've been wanting to do for a really long time, so big thank you to Trex and my own serving node Espresso for the considerable investment in getting this project off the ground. Making Space is a workshop about using art as a tool to explore and communicate science and scientific ideas. And the idea is that learning can come into the process to the artists themselves in the act of creating a piece of art or to their audience in viewing the piece of art. And this idea that art can communicate science, art that contains scientific information or is created out of scientific data, sometimes we call data-driven art or science-driven art, or sometimes we shorten it to Sci-Art. So the workshop grew out of an effort I've been working on for a long time called the Art of Planetary Science. And the Art of Planetary Science is a series of art shows. I think we've done maybe 13 or 14 over the last decade. The main annual show is in Tucson, and then that's handled largely by current graduate students at the University of Arizona with me in the background. And I often do smaller art shows at DPS meetings, some of you may have seen. So the idea behind these art shows is that science and art are both creative acts, and we invite submissions for art that are inspired by the solar system. And we display those alongside works of art that are created with scientific data or intended to communicate some piece of information. And the idea is that by displaying these two kinds of art alongside each other, you can give a new perspective on science to the audience. And what we've really found over the years is that the act of creating or engaging with this data-driven art helps people to form a meaningful connection to science outside of a traditional classroom model, right? Many people feel alienated by science. They don't think that they have the capacity to understand or learn it. But by presenting that information, that concept to them in the form of art, it allows them a way to connect to it personally on their own level and at their own, at their own comfort level. And so this is a really important outcome that we've seen come out of these shows. Of course, art also offers new ways to learn and explore ideas. And this is something that we really expand on in the workshop itself, which we can talk about more. And finally, this type of event allows people outside of academia to participate in defining really how and why we as a society are valuing science and scientific knowledge and exploration. In a time with ever-present climate change, with distrust of scientists, with the growing private space industry, it's really never been more important in our society to have broad societal discussion about what our relationship to science and our relationship to space is. And it's important that everybody is included in that conversation, not just scientists ourselves. And so again, art is a way to bring people from outside of our academic community into that. So our goal with the workshop was to sort of cultivate this connection and discussion sort of very intentionally in a smaller setting than with the art shows themselves. And the idea is that by teaching artists themselves directly how to use and promote art for learning science, they will be able to bring that science and that connection and that discussion back into spaces and communities that they inhabit in their lives that we as scientists can't reach with our other outreach efforts. So we're essentially teaching them how to do outreach for us and with us. The workshop itself, our first one was in Tucson, as Sandlin had mentioned. It's a 3-day workshop, a mix of talks and discussions and art making activities. And we had about 25 participants, and probably half of them, a little bit more, had an art background. And the remaining were a mix of educators and a handful of scientists themselves. And so we had science talks, and those focused on a theme. Since we were in Tucson, we had an Osiris-Rex and sort of asteroids theme, and we had guest talks about not just about like what we know about asteroids, but about how we explore them. How do we use the spacecraft to actually explore and learn about these other worlds? And there were other talks on things like the societal topics I mentioned, history of space art, articulating actual connections between the pursuits of science and art and the way that they actually interrelate and overlap each other. We talked a lot about actual techniques, artistic techniques in creating data-driven art, and as well as trying to give the participants tools and information for how to access and use spacecraft data and science information that they might be looking for. We also had a lot of small group discussions to sort of encourage, again, some of this dialogue about our relationship to space. What is the purpose and value of our exploration of space? So this was an activity where they were asked this question to rank, their top answers for why we should explore space, and then to write a definition of what the word exploration meant to them. And by getting together in small groups, they could really see how much they all disagreed with each other, right? The idea is that we don't all agree, and we all have different ideas about what, where we should go and how we should explore, and we should talk about that with each other. So this ended up being quite a fun activity. Paired alongside the discussion activities were sort of small group collaborative art making activities. And the intention for these was to explore connections between creativity and exploration. So for example, in this activity, the participants, each individual participant was given a prompt, for example, the image in the top left or the bottom right. And they were asked to make a piece of art in response to that prompt with no other instruction or information, just to create a piece of art with what you see. Or in some cases, it was a word or a topic. And then what they did is they got together with the other people in the room that had been given their same prompt, and they compared the pieces of art that they made and discussed things like how they interpreted the prompt and how that interpretation maybe influenced what they created or how they created the piece of art, and things like that. So this sort of collaborative art making aspect was really fun. And my favorite part of the workshop is the labs. And these are just like in a science classroom. Our labs are sort of directed art making activities that model specific techniques on how to incorporate scientific ideas or data into a work of art. So the lab that's shown here is I heard an echo there. The labs that are directed, this particular lab
2 minutes.
Thank you. This particular lab was focused on, they could choose their favorite constellation, and then they used a free online planetarium program to learn about the different stars in their constellation. And through the process of going through the instructions in the lab, booklet, they learned about the different properties and attributes of stars, and then represented that visually in the piece of art that they created. And so there was a bunch of different labs that they could choose from and work on in parallel. We had a poetry lab focused around high-rise images of Mars, a painting lab that was looking at painting Jupiter in different wavelengths and using that as a way to explore how it looks different in different wavelengths and what we can learn about it. A music box lab focused on learning about orbital resonances. We had some origami and some other stuff. So the labs were really fun activities to be able to do. And the idea was that they would learn how to create this kind of art by having that modeled for them. And then finally, at the end, the participants were asked to take what they learned and bring it home and to create their own work of science-driven art. And then we came back virtually a couple of weeks later for everybody to show off what they had made. And about half the participants did it, and they made some really cool stuff. So that was really exciting. So just to end here, I couldn't be more happy with how our first workshop went. I think it was fantastic. In the end, some of the participants really focused on the data-driven art aspect and were really drawn to that. some of the participants kind of more just focused on exploring their own personal connection to science or to space. And I think both of those are fantastic outcomes that are really positive and really long lasting. I think that the impact of this experience for them will be long lasting. And I'm just going to end here with a few quotes that I got in my feedback forums or during discussions to give you a sense of their experience. This lab really shows how art can be used as a different way of learning something. I want to try using it in my class. And this participant is using the astronomy lab in their undergrad astronomy class this summer, so I can't wait to see how it went. I think I might try using art as a way to meditate on and progress my own research. Again, fantastic outcome of a way to use art. As an artist, I've always felt alienated by science, even though I was interested in it. But now I feel like you've broken down barriers that I had put up for myself, and I can interact with the world in a completely new way. So I will end there. And again, thank you for the support for this workshop, and I can't wait to do more.